What is up, Bitcoiners? It's your boy CK, and I have an absolutely fantastic episode of the Bitcoin Magazine podcast for you. I had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Eric Weiss, the CEO and founder of the BIG Fund, the Bitcoin Investment Group Fund. Eric is an OG in the Bitcoin space. He got into Bitcoin in 2014 as an institutional investor, and he really saw the long game in Bitcoin. But little do people know that Eric is a very good friend of Michael Saylor, and he is actually the man responsible to opening Michael Saylor's eyes to the potential of Bitcoin. And, the rest is history there. Michael Saylor has made absolute history in 2020 and 2021, has really tried to advocate and legitimize Bitcoin. But really, you can point that all back to Eric. I had a great time talking to Eric, talking about, what Bitcoin is doing to the world, how people are viewing Bitcoin, how March 2020, that big crash on, I think it was like Black Thursday in the traditional markets, and the entire COVID crisis, and, the K-shaped recovery that happened in the traditional markets afterwards, how that woke a lot of people up, including Saylor, to the weakness and the inability to actually hold and store value in the traditional system. And I think it's really important that things like that have pushed people towards Bitcoin and opened people up towards Bitcoin. I think, Eric obviously used that opportunity to get Michael Saylor into Bitcoin. Speaking of Michael Saylor and Eric, they're both going to be at Bitcoin 2021. Michael is a speaker. Eric, he's going to be there. He's going to be a VIP in the Whale area. And y'all, you can't miss this conference. This is going to be the biggest, the baddest Bitcoin conference in history. We've already sold out 90% of our tickets, almost 100% sold out for the Whale passes, which is our VIP section. And we are 100% sold out for our after party. So y'all, go to Bitcoin 2021's website, b.tc/conference. Go check out all the amazing speakers. Go check out the tickets. They're pretty freaking pricey at this point. I apologize, but the reality is you waited to the last minute, and what can we do? We can't sell out. We want to keep selling these tickets, so we just keep raising the prices. You can save 10% off when you use promo code Satoshi. That is Satoshi spelled Satoshi. And if you pay in Bitcoin, you can also save an additional $200. We are giving a massive discount for people who pay in Bitcoin because we want your sats. We don't want your filthy fiat. So y'all, Bitcoin Magazine puts on the best Bitcoin event. The best Bitcoin event is happening June 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Miami 2021. And, get your ticket, be there or be a no coiner. All right, let's get into this fantastic podcast with Eric Weiss. All right, Bitcoiners. I got a good podcast for you guys. I'm sitting across from Eric Weiss. Eric is the CEO of the Big Fund, the Bitcoin Fund. Eric, you've been in the space since 2014, and you may have done the most impactful thing in history, which is you showed Michael Saylor the way, and now Michael Saylor is showing a lot of corporates the way of Bitcoin. And I'm excited to talk to you about a whole bunch of things, but I want to start off by just introducing my audience who may or may not know who you are, and get them up to speed on yourself and your history in the space.
Sure. So I started off like a lot of folks in the space in traditional finance. I was a U.S. government bond trader, somewhat ironically, and then went to Columbia Business School. And after that, got into technology, mostly internet venture capital kind of stuff, and found my way to Bitcoin. Bought my first Bitcoin in December of 2013, and have kind of been in around the space since. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, so you've been in it since 2014. Like, obviously, you've kind of seen things evolve. I was listening to your podcast with Swan Signal, and something that you said really caught my ear was that at the time of 2014, when you discovered Bitcoin, you realized that it was probably better to buy and hold this thing rather than try to create a business necessarily around it right away. I'm kind of curious, like that is something that not a lot of people in 2014 were thinking about when they saw Bitcoin. I'm kind of curious, like, what insight did you have that kind of made you see that kind of correct investment thesis?
So, I went to a Bitcoin conference in Miami. That was kind of my first exposure. And it was like, people walking around with t-shirts, hey, we'll help you set up your wallet kind of thing. And with my VC perspective, my thought was, I knew a lot about internet investing. That's what I'd been doing for a living. And the internet was really good for moving information and data around the world really quickly, not in a particularly secure way. I mean, email is kind of the obvious example of that, right? And then when I saw Bitcoin for the first time, like, I'm not sure I could put it into these words at the time, but what I knew was this is a way to use the internet to move value around the world safely for the first time. And I hadn't seen that before. So I knew that there was something there. And I thought, okay, thinking like a VC who invests in businesses, like, what can I do? What business can I start here? This is going to be something, right? And at the time, it was really simple businesses that you could have contemplated. It was a directory of companies that may have accepted Bitcoin or something like that, like really rudimentary kind of stuff. And the more I thought about it, I thought all of those businesses have execution risk, right? Anytime you're going to go into any business of any kind, you could screw up the business, the industry could move in a direction and you lose. And I just kept thinking that if this Bitcoin stuff is going to work out and be a thing, the price of Bitcoin is going to appreciate. And probably the lowest risk thing to do is just buy Bitcoin. And I think what's particularly ironic about that thought at that time is it still holds true today. So, no knock on Coinbase or anything, but buying coin, people say to me, are you buying Coinbase stock? Did you buy Coinbase stock? Or, are you buying this miner or that miner? And the answer is no. Like, I can buy Bitcoin. Why would same thing still holds. Why would I take the execution risk? Why would I take the risk that company screws up? The CEO does something stupid. They do a terrible acquisition. They get on the wrong side of the law, whatever it is, right? I don't need to take any of that like corporate execution risk. I can just own Bitcoin. And it's just amazing to me that as much as the industry has evolved, I think that's still the right answer.
Yeah, my bad. So the really interesting thing about that is it like doesn't seem profound, but at the same time, I feel like it's like the most profound thing about Bitcoin ever is that like it is sound money and therefore you don't have to allocate yourself to business risk just to get by. And especially not before hyper Bitcoinization, but even maybe after. And I'm just kind of curious, like, have you like thought about that? Just because like, I think a lot of people who are maybe in a fiat mindset, they struggle with this idea of like, we aren't encouraging people to like plunge capital into businesses all the time because for them, that seems like the world's going to break. Like, the world stops spinning if we stop doing that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? I have lots of conversations with all different types of investors in the space. And it's a double-edged sword because for some people, simplicity means it can't be that good, right? I had a meeting with a guy recently who's plowing $75 million into shitcoins. And he wants all kinds of shitcoin bets. And his rationale for doing it is Bitcoin's too easy. Like he's 100% sure that Bitcoin is going to double in value in the next 12 months, but that's not exciting enough for him, right? And so the other part of that double-edged sword is nobody has to contribute anything to benefit from, what's going to happen to Bitcoin. You can actually, just take the word of a friend or someone that you trust who says you should really buy Bitcoin. And if you listen, it's going to work out just as well for you as it did for them, right? So it's it's a little bittersweet in that, it feels like it should be more of a meritocracy. Maybe people should be adding more value to get the value. And really all you have to do is buy the stuff to participate.
I mean, like zooming out, like, have you thought about like the macro geopolitical, human sociological implications of that? I know, like, hey, 5 minutes into the podcast, Eric, let me just like
we're getting deep, huh?
Yeah, let's get cosmic already, but like, I guess we're here.
Right. So when you say like the sociological implications, that in what sense? In the
like, what if everyone holds Bitcoin, right? And you said that like, hey, investing in businesses around Bitcoin is just not even worth it. Like, you just keep holding this thing, and it was true in 2014. It's true today. Maybe it's true in 2025. Like, how long does that still, like, if that remains a fact, like how
Yeah,
long does that start to break things or make things like different or weird?
I think that's a shorter term phenomenon. And the reason that's the case is we're in a situation now where there's a paradigm shift, right? There's a change in what the best store of value is. And so we're seeing outsized returns in the short run, just due to the capital flows coming into Bitcoin, supply demand dynamics, price goes up, right? So, we're looking at like 600% or something for the year. I don't think that's not a sustainable trajectory, right? It's just not. And then those other businesses, traditional, equity opportunities, investment opportunities, business opportunities around the Bitcoin ecosystem are still awesome. That's not to say that there's some risk in executing those things, but there are companies in this space that are going to be massive success stories, right? Whether it's Lightning and payment related stuff, or Bitcoin bank type things like NYDIG and others. There are tremendous opportunities in and around this new digital asset class that Bitcoin is creating. So I still think, and by the way, to that investor that I referred to's kind of thesis, 100% return is pretty awesome. Or even Bitcoin probably has the potential to deliver many X 100% return, but it's still not the 0 to a trillion kind of thing that you could get investing in like the next Uber, Facebook, that kind of thing, right? And I think those opportunities are going to exist because of Bitcoin and around Bitcoin. If you started a company that kind of hung off Bitcoin, you can see massive upside, many more multiples return than you could holding Bitcoin. That said, the return profile from just holding Bitcoin is still ridiculously compelling, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I guess as a guy with a venture technology background, looking at Bitcoin today and then where the Bitcoin space is going to go, maybe in the, let's call it like 2 to 5 year range, like how do you go about thinking about like the opportunity cost of going away from just Bitcoin straight up?
At the moment, I have no desire to go away from Bitcoin straight up. I think that, Bitcoin straight up can start to take smaller steps as far as diversification, whether it's taking advantage of some of the yield opportunities, borrow opportunities, like the cash and carry kind of things that, we spoke about once before, those kinds of things to kind of, a Bitcoin plus kind of strategy, but really still based on just holding the asset. I think those are the next stage of opportunity. And those are still like maturing. I don't think they're there yet. I think that's the next, 2 to 3 year cycle that you mentioned, when we start to get really comfortable with whatever counterparty risk there may be there and the security and hypothecation of the Bitcoin. I think those things will start to get answered in a way that's a lot more comfortable.
Gotcha. And I guess what would it take for you to start like, getting excited about opportunities to invest in like Bitcoin related businesses or businesses that are leveraging Bitcoin in some way? Like, when I guess, where does Bitcoin going to have to be for you to start like being like, okay, it's interesting to start looking for Bitcoin unicorns now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't know that I know the answer, but I can answer it with a negative, right? Like, I think that Bitcoin flipping gold is an extremely high probability, right? Like, choose my words carefully, but it's an extremely high probability. I don't want to call it like a risk-free rate of return, which would be like 10x from where we are now, but it's a high probability 10x return, taking no execution risk of any kind, right? In my world, a 10x return is a damn good return. I don't know that I need a better return than 10x return. When we get to that level, when Bitcoin gets to 500,000 of Bitcoin, obviously have to reevaluate that time, see what the landscape is. But the 10x return from there, Bitcoin going to 5 million, could be a little tougher putt. And so, we'll see. We're going to bring in a lot of other geopolitical forces at those kinds of thresholds. And, we're starting to shake up the global monetary system pretty good at those kinds of levels. And we'll see what happens. It's a little, there's just too imperfect in information to kind of think about how that unfolds at this point. But I think at some point when I didn't think that there were pretty easy 10x returns to be had, then I'll start looking at other opportunities. Unless something
Gotcha.
super compelling came along,
Yep. So, head on a swivel, but as long as, Bitcoin's trajectory looks like it's going to continue to 10x, like why do anything else?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing that's really hard to strip out from these other opportunities is they all hinge on the success of Bitcoin. Like one of the things that Saylor's been really loud about is the Bitcoin miners who weren't hodling their Bitcoin. And it's kind of like you've already got all your stakeholders. If you're a Bitcoin miner, you've already got all your shareholders and all your stakeholders have signed up to have, Bitcoin exposure, so to speak, right? Your business lives or dies with the success of Bitcoin. So why wouldn't you hodl as much Bitcoin as you could? Why wouldn't you issue debt, do everything you can, get more Bitcoin, and just win bigger? Because if you die, it's binary. You're dead, right? Like if Bitcoin didn't work out, whether you die really hard or die a little bit hard, doesn't matter. You might as well win bigger. And the truth of the matter is owning that Bitcoin can mitigate a lot of execution mistakes, right? If you make business mistakes and the Bitcoin you're hodling appreciates, shit, you might just be able to bail yourself out and have another shot, or your shareholders still win. So I think still holding Bitcoin in as direct a form as one can is still the best play today, which is pretty amazing considering the price appreciation we've seen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that a lot of those miners were selling because Michael Saylor didn't show them how to speculative attack the dollar like he's doing. So he's writing the playbook, and I personally think public miners are going to start doing some gnarly things to the U.S. dollar. Like that's the attack vector right there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't even say those words, but I don't know. That's kind of what I see.
I don't know. I actually think the success of Bitcoin is probably going to be good for the U.S. dollar. I know that's not necessarily a popular view, but I do think that's going to be the case. I think that, we will see Bitcoin as that asset layer kind of underpinning a currency layer. And I think, the dollar will be the predominant currency globally. So it could be good for the dollar in a perverse way.
Yeah. So, interesting. I've heard a lot of different theses about how Bitcoin is good for the US. I haven't heard Bitcoin is good for the dollar before. But I guess central banks might peg to Bitcoin, and then, every fiat would be like a pseudo Bitcoin scaling layer, right?
You got it. Exactly. You're in some foreign country, somewhere in Africa, and you've got Bitcoin on your Android device. And when you need to transact, it's in a currency. And in theory, you could transact in any currency you want, right? If it's going around central banks, and you could transact in digital dollar. And that would probably be, your choice because it's the choice of the person receiving it, and then settle back into Bitcoin. So I think you just could see a lot more velocity, a lot more utilization of the dollar. That may not be awesome for the purchasing power of a dollar relative to what it is today, but it's good for the use of the dollar.
We'll see how that shakes out. I don't know if you read Nick Bhatia's Layered Money, but he has a thesis that is kind of has a very similar tune to that. So it does kind of make sense. So we're looking forward. I want to go back, right? So you got into Bitcoin 2014. What did you see as Bitcoin's potential then? Because I remember in your Swan signal, you said Bitcoin's kind of surprised you, and even maybe Michael Saylor jumping in, he was able to think even bigger of Bitcoin than you thought of before Saylor. So can you kind of talk about just maybe your progression of how you saw Bitcoin?
Sure. And it's a progression in progress. So initially, like I said, I mean, the really big thing for me, I don't think I can overstate this enough, is that for the first time I saw Bitcoin as a way to transmit value over the internet. And what was particularly interesting about that to me was party A and party B did not have to know or trust each other for that to happen, right? It was trustless. And it was like, oh man, like you don't have to verify that what I'm sending you is real. Like we know it's real and you're willing to take it. And that was kind of mind boggling. And I just thought, okay, for the first time, we can transmit value anywhere in the world between parties that don't know each other. And that, like, I know now we probably take it for granted to a large degree, but at the time, that really just blew my mind, right? That didn't exist before this. So that was the overarching impact from that conference for me and why I stuck with it and got involved. As time has gone on and I've gotten more into it, I started to view Bitcoin as an investment, I guess was my initial thought. Like, I'm going to put money in this because this is going to go up. And then I always had it in my head that, well, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin at this price or something, or, when it hits here, I'm going to take this many chips off the table, or I'm going to, that kind of mentality. And it wasn't until after Michael got in and I started to view things differently, in large part due to, kind of some of his perspectives and just how deep he went with it. I started to think, shit, I'm probably never selling my Bitcoin. And then I went from, thinking, I've got a lot of my money in this stuff, maybe I should be a little more diversified, to waking up every day with this nagging feeling that I just don't have enough, like that Bitcoiner mentality that we all have, right? Where it's like, oh shit, I don't have enough. Like, as Saylor says, you don't have to put all your money in Bitcoin, just the money you want to keep, and that's really kind of how I think about it. I feel like the rest of my assets are at risk.
Yeah, no, I feel that. And I remember last week, Jim Cramer sold half of his Bitcoin at the top. So I guess it was a good local trade, right? For a mortgage,
Yeah.
felt like trading
No,
money.
it wasn't a good local
like
trade. It was
no
not a good
Bitcoiner would
local
care.
trade.
Okay, I
But it
don't
was
know.
not a
I
good
don't trade
local
ever.
trade.
I've
He
never
bought it.
sold one Satoshi, Eric. So I mean, like,
Good for you. That's impressive. That's impressive.
Yeah.
But
So
it wasn't
I
a
can't
good
relate
trade.
to him.
It was not a good trade. It was not a good trade because he bought it. He had short-term cap gains, right? Like his podcast with Pomp was pretty recently. So he got crushed in taxes for selling it. So he sold and took a short-term cap gain hit, which I'm pretty sure Cramer's tax rate's pretty brutal. And then, so he paid taxes, paid off presumably really low yielding debt. My guess is the guy's got pretty good credit and was like, paid off a mortgage against the house. So what could he have been paying? 3%? So it's downright, I'll try not to be I'll try not to be Saylor like hyperbolic, but it's fucking stupid, right? Because
I think it's stupid. So don't get me wrong.
It's stupid because the dude paid off low single digit yielding debt that he was getting to borrow in real terms, which Jim Cramer is smart enough to know. If you're, not a financial guy, fine. I get it. Maybe this stuff doesn't come second nature to you, but the currency is being devalued. You're paying a 2 to 3% interest rate on this. You're actually in real terms being paid to borrow that money, right? You are paying back an amount of money in 30 years from now that will be worth less, even net of the interest rate that you're paying, than the money you borrowed today. To make matters worse, you sold an appreciating asset that's appreciating greater than the rate the money supply is getting inflated away to do it. It's just, it was really disappointing to see because so many retail people do listen to him. And what was particularly awful was, and I know that he's like a media guy and he says things for effect and likes and follows and ever, but the fact that he referred to it as like funny money or something or whatever, phony money or something, whatever he did, I thought was like a little disingenuous because he would be the first person to tell you not to put real money into anything, that wasn't real. So it was just a little disingenuous of him, I thought.
I'm not here to defend Cramer. I thought at least he sold 66 and not 55. But I've never sold a single Satoshi, and I plan to never sell a Satoshi. So you're gonna have to come and take it. All right. So I want to, okay, let's talk about, kind of your conversations with Saylor and how you kind of
Sure.
got him into grok Bitcoin. A lot of it was around like this March timeframe where like things kind of went bonkers. I remember March 13th, Friday, March 13th is the day that the US shut down. And that's kind of eerie in of itself.
Yep.
But like, can you just talk about that time frame? Not necessarily even like maybe
Sure.
like the conversations of Saylor, but like what did that, like the economy doing what it did, the K-shaped recovery, all that kind of stuff, like what did it, like did that wake people up, do you think, like other than just yourselves? Like how many people were having the kind of conversation that you and Michael were having?
It's an interesting question. So we were probably not unlike most people. Michael and I have been friends for more than 20 years, and we kind of bond and talk a lot about technology investing and things like that. And obviously, he wrote The Mobile Wave. He's got a really unique ability to foresee how technology is going to proliferate in the future. If you go back and read The Mobile Wave now, it's like ridiculously spot on. When at the time, this was like, pretty far-fetched kind of stuff about how everything was going to be dematerialized. So he's just got a gift for seeing those kind of things. But so, we were kind of spending a lot of time hanging out together during quarantine and looking at the stock market, talking about the government printing money and kind of, lockdown, civil liberties being taken away from folks, et cetera, and kind of scratching our heads like at how this was all unfolding in a way that was kind of counterintuitive in a lot of ways, this K-shaped recovery that was starting to take place. I divested a lot of tech stocks at that time. I just thought from, as more and more people are getting laid off, the economy shutting down, businesses are literally shutting down, businesses that were generations of years old are, just literally getting destroyed, closed, gone.
You sold the bottom.
Maybe, but I bought more Bitcoin. So
I sold the bottom. I justified it because I bought more Bitcoin too. But I don't mean to throw you under the bus here. Just commenting.
That's maybe I sold the bottom. That said, we got in pretty early in our tech investment, so they were still good runs for us. And they've done a lot of studies about successful investors, and the only common trait that I think Harvard found between different asset classes of successful investors was they didn't pick the tops. So yes, we did. Yes, I didn't sell at the top, and yes, maybe we picked like a little bit of a local bottom there in March and sold some tech stocks, too low. But it was just a function of kind of frustration, wanting to step outside of things, recognizing that there was a paradigm shift of some kind that was happening. And that was a lot of what our discussions were about. And I'd been talking about Bitcoin and digital assets to Mike for a number of years at that point. And every time I brought it up, it was sometimes politely, sometimes not so politely brushed aside. And in light of what was happening in the world, he was a lot more receptive to hearing about Bitcoin at that time. And when we were having a conversation about, he recalls me saying something like, anytime there's dramatic change like this, a paradigm shift like this, there's opportunity. We just have to find the opportunity. And it was kind of in that context, with his frustration with what was going on with the capital he had in MicroStrategy, that melted. We don't talk about his company, but based on what he said, that kind of stuff that was kind of eating away at him, that he was receptive to hearing about Bitcoin. And over the course of a few days, he managed to pull out all the information that I had on me on Bitcoin, which I guess in hindsight wasn't that much compared to how much he knows now. And then he said, well, how do I learn more about this now that I've exhausted what you're capable of telling me? And so I pointed him to folks on Twitter and, different books and podcasts and stuff that he could delve into. And he did, and he got pretty deep. And then, sometime in Q2, he called me and told me that he bought a lot more Bitcoin than I thought he was going to buy. So.
Yeah, 10,000 Bitcoin, right? It does that first swing.
Bitcoin was like at 10,000 at the time though. So, and he usually texts, he doesn't call so much. So the phone rings, I pick it up, and he said, yeah, well, I just bought some Bitcoin. And I said, oh, good, welcome to Bitcoin. Kind of casual conversation between buddies. And he's like, yeah, 10,000. And I was like, you bought $10,000 worth of Bitcoin? He's like, no, I bought 10,000 Bitcoin. And I was like, fuck, it's like $100 million worth of Bitcoin. So I went from thinking, yeah, I got my buddy into Bitcoin to going, oh man, like, anybody who's been in it as long as we have and has lived through what we've lived through, there's some volatility. So that there's a good chance that if your buddy puts $100 million into Bitcoin, he's going to experience some days where he's not that happy with you, So I was like, it was a little scary. So, but anyway, he is, as the world now knows, he is someone of tremendous conviction who does their own research, who makes their own decisions, and he's quite committed.
So how by the end of that phone call, did you know that wasn't going to be an issue, or like how long did it take for you to be like, okay, like this guy is he's into this thing. He's not going to just get shaken out.
Yeah. So I guess my view was a little more selfish. Like, you don't want to lose a friend over something like this. So I think I don't remember exactly where Bitcoin was, but his average price was somewhere in like the $10,000 range. I don't know. He said it publicly. I don't really know the numbers, but and then his company's initial price, I think, was like 11,111 or something.
All ones.
All ones, as they should be, right? And so like when he was kind of in the range of like up 100% on those collective investments, I think I said something to him like, this worked out okay, right? Like, anything from here is kind of, I'm out. We're good, right?
I'm no longer responsible.
Yeah, I don't think I use those words because he is. I mean, you can see by the level of research and information that he does. Like, I wasn't responsible, long before that. He didn't buy $100 million because his buddy told him to. I just, helped him take those first couple steps.
For sure. Awesome. I mean, I'm sure that it's only strengthened your relationship. It's done the probably the exact opposite of the kind of like the initial fears there. But I could totally I haven't successfully gotten someone to go balls deep, at least from what I can tell. But hopefully one day I'll have a story and I'll be like, I'll have to like give them the talk like, all right, hey, be careful here. Don't get shaken out. It's not my fault if you blow it.
His stock has had a lot of volatility. So he's lived through some big ups and downs. And, to his credit, even now, like we still hang out quite a bit. And, he's really impervious to the price moves, which as am I to, almost completely, right? I think once you have it in your head where this is going, you actually kind of like the dips. That's hard for people to understand, right? But you do, because it's kind of like
celebrate them.
You do, because it's an opportunity for you and the people you care about to pick up a little bit more, and if you have conviction about what the end game looks like, then it really is an opportunity.
So one thing that I think you're kind of hinting at, and we've been talking about it, is like Bitcoin aligns incentives, right? One of my favorite podcasters, Ansel Lindner, talks about this, but like Bitcoin, it seems like in a Bitcoin world, the incentives are aligned, and that comes from like, even the holders are incentivized to like share Bitcoin. And, I guess, your claim to fame is the guy who orange pilled Saylor. Like that is even a celebration of like that aligned incentive. Like, I guess, have you kind of like thought about like, I guess this alignment of incentives and how stakeholders are kind of aligned a little bit differently than in maybe other areas?
Yeah, it's something we talk about and think about a lot. It's amazing to me that there just doesn't have to be a loser in this whole equation. It's not a zero-sum game at all. And whether it, because everybody knows Saylor's story, it's a good example, right? Obviously, it was good for Michael personally, right? It certainly didn't hurt me and my business. It was great for MicroStrategy shareholders. It was great for all the Bitcoin hodlers, right? To have this new articulate, intelligent advocate. So it was great for Michael's charity, Saylor, Saylor Academy, Saylor.org, where he provides free education. They have Bitcoin now as well, right? and it's helped fund them. So it's like there's just no loser in this equation. No one had to lose for all of these constituencies to win. And the more I look at different areas of Bitcoin, the more that seems to be the case, right? Like nobody has to lose for this to help people. And I think Jack Dorsey does a really awesome job at focusing on the component that suggests that Bitcoin truly is good for the world, not the rich, not the K-shaped recovery world, but really the world, the banking the unbanked and providing people a way to save. These are really, really powerful things that are not just pie in the sky bullshit narratives. This is a way to make the world a better place, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm always kind of awestruck by the, like the compounding good that Bitcoin is. But at the same time, the majority of the world either is like neutral, if not just baseline skeptical or aggressive towards Bitcoin. And they see it as like being this thing that, first is negative before it could potentially even be a positive. Like, where is this kind of like misconception? Like, how do we kind of come to terms with the fact that, we think that it's this amazing thing that aligns incentives, and then, the rest of the world just kind of hates it as a baseline?
Yeah, there are varying degrees of the skepticism and hatred, right? First of all, I think most people are resistant to change. There's a small subset of people that do really well with change and embrace it and look for it. But by and large, human beings are, resistant to change. So there's that. That's why you have that technology adoption curve kind of thing, right? That we've all seen a million times. There's that. But then there's a bigger piece of this as well, where you get the really vitriolic pushback. And that is, it's hard to get someone to embrace something new when it threatens their entire existence and what their world is based on. So obviously the entire banking community, Wall Street, they're really resistant to this, right? Like Jamie Dimon's whole, he'll fire anyone that he sees, trading Bitcoin or whatever his exact words were, right? Like that fear that this is a technology and a settlement opportunity where we don't need that trusted third party in the middle. And hundreds of thousands and millions of people have made a really good living being that trusted third party in the middle. And this threatens their entire existence. So I think for that constituency, it's very difficult for them to view this objectively. And they're inclined to just FUD the shit out of it, right? Hedge fund community as well to a degree. So, but it's all the more powerful when they start to flip, right? Morgan Stanley flip, Goldman flip. I think we're about to hear another big bank flip. And they're going to offer Bitcoin to the trillions of dollars of capital that they have under management. And so why are they doing that? And there's only one reason they're doing it. Just one reason. Money is leaving their banks in amounts that it has never left before. And that's the lifeblood of their business. When billions of dollars start leaving your bank to go into Bitcoin related investments, and they track this stuff, they will start to offer products to keep the money there.
So I think you're pointing to like this insane amount of demand for Bitcoin, whether it's institutions or it seems retail as well. Like there's this like kind of like crazy fervor around it, especially as the prices are going up right now. We see this in the Canadian ETFs. I think the principal ETF is like one of the biggest ETFs in Canadian stock history, the biggest one, but even in an American stock market history, it's huge. Can you kind of talk a little bit about like what you're seeing maybe from an institutional / just general demand for Bitcoin right now?
Yeah, the retail demand is a big thing. I think people underestimate just how big a piece this retail is, and it's big for a couple of reasons. It's big because in sheer dollars, it's a lot of money. And, between say Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and JP Morgan, you're looking at like $12 trillion of AUM between those three banks. That's a lot of money. And people say, I see this on Twitter a lot, people are like, these people could have bought Bitcoin before, like, why didn't they just buy it through, XYZ, Coinbase, this, that, whatever, right? The truth is these banking relationships sometimes go back decades or generations, and they're very sticky relationships. And I'm in a place with my Bitcoin fund where we see these big institutions literally trying to stop that money from coming out. Like they tried to stop it. Like I have had investors who've had wires take multiple days for them to get their money out of these banks because they don't want to send the wires. They don't want that money leaving their firm. So that's a big piece of the puzzle. The other thing that really is a big factor there, and I think this doesn't get talked about much, is those buyers are not price sensitive. They don't care what the price per Bitcoin is. So they say, I've got $10 million with Morgan Stanley, put 10% of my money in Bitcoin. And they're going to put an allocation of $1 million into Bitcoin. They don't care. They're not saying, what's Bitcoin trading at today? It's an allocation, which is particularly good for Bitcoin as you want to go, past certain like emotional thresholds in price in US dollars.
Yeah, I mean, and even like the dollar cost average daily DCA strategy that a lot of Bitcoiners push amongst like the true plebs and retail, even that kind of has a similar like price insensitivity to it, and just it doesn't matter. It's cheap right now. Just keep allocating. So I mean, is it like, how do you see like the floor for Bitcoin? Do you like try to assess like what is the floor line demand? Is that something that you can measure, you think?
No, I don't spend any time thinking about that. I think maybe it's a little simplistic, but I kind of feel like the end game is it's going to, $500,000. It's going to flip gold. And I don't even think about the price at all. It's just, at the end of the day, if you buy it today at wherever it is, like 54 or something, I can't see on the block clock behind you, but if it's like, if it's like 54,000 or 64,000 or 74,000 and it's going to 500,000, does it make a difference? Not really. You have friends, I have friends, Saylor and I have a good friend. It was like Bitcoin was 10,500 or something over the summer, and he was going to buy in, and he wanted to pay under 10,000. That was his thing. Well, he didn't get in. He's still not in. The mistake wasn't, paying 10,500. The mistake was not getting in at all. So, someone comes in today at 54,000 and tomorrow it's 45,000. Okay, I guess you could have gotten a little more Bitcoin, but at least you're in.
Yeah. So and I find that one of the biggest mistakes, right, is people look at the price. They're not really comparing Bitcoin to any markets that Bitcoin can surpass. Like you've compared it to gold here, and they have a difficult time kind of like, measuring Bitcoin up and be like, what could this thing be? They don't know what the price could be. So they think 55,000. Yeah. Wow, that's almost 3x the previous all-time high. I just got to wait for it to go lower.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword when you don't have fundamentals to point to, right? There's no cash flows, there's no multiples. People talk about stock to flow a lot. So yeah, that becomes a double-edged sword. And that's why, for me, I kind of bring it back. I continue to bring it back to gold for prospective investors because it provides for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think Bitcoin really is a digital gold, and it's a helpful framework to compare, where valuations could be. And all this FUD and all the people who don't believe it, it's the only reason we're not there now, right? So I actually think that a slower progression up the US dollar price chart is healthy for Bitcoin. So I don't mind the haters. I actually think we need them, and it's constructive. And price appreciation in US dollars too quickly, I think is potentially more negative than positive.
All right, this is my last question for you, but you've been through several cycles now. I did a podcast with Bitcoin Tino where we talked about the hardest trade and the potential for their, maybe because institutions are here now, because Bitcoin is now a legitimate asset, that maybe the historic kind of having driven blow off top bear market cycles might not be a thing anymore. Do you have an opinion about like this kind of like greater topic of like the so-called super cycle and like potential of that? Do you think about that at all? I know you're not selling, so what does it matter? But I'm just kind of curious what your opinion is.
I had dinner with Tina last night. So
that's awesome.
I almost got a couple words in. I wish I had an opinion on that, but I don't. I just kind of, like you said, if you're not selling, all I think is maybe I'll get more opportunities as I come in, to more fiat through other legacy stuff that I have going on, where there'll be an opportunity to buy more. And that's great, because when I come into that fiat, I'm going to have to buy it at whatever price freaking thing's trading at. So if I get to buy it cheaper, great. I mean, I get asked a lot about, I go in Clubhouse once in a while, and people always want to ask, someone asked the other day, like, about timing the market like Saylor when he's buying Bitcoin. And I'm like, timing the market? Like, he has stated many times, and like all the evidence and data points to it, he literally buys Bitcoin every time he has the money. Like, he being MicroStrategy, right? Like, every time they come into capital, they buy Bitcoin and give a shit what the price is, right? So like, I don't know, I kind of have like the same perspective. It's like, if it dips and I'm averaging down, awesome, and if it doesn't and I've got to pay 120,000 for BTC, what else am I going to do with it? Put it in something that's going to, do less well against Bitcoin? If I'm buying at 100,000, and it's going to 500,000, I'm still making 5x return on whatever it is. I might not be getting that many Bitcoin for whatever amount of money I'm putting in, but still going up 5x.
So, I mean, I guess less even from a trading perspective, but more just from like what the world is going to react to. Like, let's just say a Bitcoin that only goes up. I know that's a meme, like only up, Laura, but like, what if that actually happens?
It's that NGU
it
technology.
actually plays kind of like that. Like, the world is just waking up to Bitcoin 1% at a time, and it's just a nonstop rate. Like, do you like think about that again, not from like a trading perspective, but just maybe like a popcorn perspective? Because we're sitting here, we're Bitcoin holders already.
Yeah, I think, I look at the charts a lot. I like to, not because I want to watch the price on such a frequent basis, but because like I feel like the market is like a living, breathing thing, and I want to be able to relate to the pulse of the market. And so if I look at like a minute chart on, I use Binance just because I think the volume there is statistically significant and their charts are pretty good. So I use the Binance chart pretty often. And you can put volume on there as well as, some of the moving averages, et cetera. And so if I look at the chart by minute, right, you can see a lot of volatility in there, and get kind of a feel for when big, trades come in, pushing it up or down. And then if you start to, concern's not the right word, but if you start to think, oh, we're seeing a trend, on like a minute chart, like just zoom out, just zoom out. And if you zoom out to that daily chart and you start looking at it, the big picture, all the trends are incredibly intact, and it really does just go up and to the right, maybe someday that's not going to be the case, but that's where it's going.
Yeah, if you zoom out enough, there are no dips even, right? It just goes straight up to the right.
Exactly.
So.
It gives you, and literally that's the definition of perspective, right? Like that is getting some perspective. Investment shouldn't be lived minute to minute. For traders, I don't knock traders. I was a bond trader. I get it. There's a value to that. But if you're an investor, zoom out, look at the trends, buy and hold, Warren Buffett's style. You should be holding something for a long time.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap this one up. Eric, what's your last word for the Bitcoin Magazine audience?
Yeah, I'm afraid that the last word is just not going to be that creative. Just buy and hodl, man. It's like, if there's a theme to what we talked about, it really is that simple. But I will add one thing to that theme, and that is education. And I feel like, the one thing that enables investors to weather the volatility of Bitcoin, because there is volatility, is education. That is the superpower, right? If you understand it and you have conviction and you've done the research, then when it goes up 50%, you're not inclined to sell and take your profits because you don't think you got lucky, right? And by the same token, when it goes down and it dips, whatever double-digit percent it dips, you're not panicking because you've done the research and you have that Warren Buffett mentality that it's now on sale. So educate yourself. Hope.com is a great source. Read the Bitcoin Standard and do enough research that you can have conviction in your investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to say, every time I'm on Twitter and it's dumping and I just see all the Bitcoiners posting their buy picks, it really does show you the level of conviction that Bitcoiners have. Eric,
Awesome.
where can people find you? I know you have a fund. We didn't even talk about it, which shame on me, but we should definitely do that next time.
Fine.
But yeah.
It's just a Bitcoin fund for institutional investors. We custody our Bitcoin at Fidelity Digital Assets, charge really low fees, like 1%. Per year with no other expenses attached to it. And the one cool, really unique thing that you would appreciate about our fund is it's one of the few funds where you can actually get Bitcoin. So you invest in US dollars, and if and when an investor chooses to leave, they can have US dollars back, or they can have the equivalent amount of Bitcoin, which is pretty cool. So you get some of the best of both worlds there. But best place is just on Twitter, Eric_BIG fund. And that's it.
Let's go. The big fund. You love to hear it, Eric. Again, I really appreciate your time.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I hear that you're going to be at the Bitcoin 2021 conference too. So I hope to shake your hand there in person.
For sure, man. Looking forward to meeting in person. Thanks for having me at it.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, for all the listeners, make sure to come to Bitcoin 2021 and meet me and Eric and all the other fantastic people there. Make sure to give us those 5-star reviews, likes, shares, all the above. And yeah, until then, peace.